Good evening and welcome to the public session of the Halton District School Board for Wednesday, September the 21st, 2016. And apparently it's officially the last day of summer as well. So I hope everyone enjoyed it because I understand it's actually supposed to be quite cool tomorrow. Yay? Who's saying yay? You can tell this. Oh, okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I would like to recognize that everyone except the director is here tonight, and and Superintendent Truthen, and they do send their regrets. I would like to ask that if you have something that makes noise, if you could silence it or turn it off, it would be very much appreciated. And the fact that this meeting is video voice recorded and transmitted to the millions out on the web. So wave, say hi. The Halton District School Board would also like to acknowledge and thank the First Peoples of this territory and other Indigenous peoples for sharing this land in order for us to continue our work today. So I would like to also acknowledge that we have two members at our table, and they will be introduced very shortly, but we have our two student trustees with us tonight. And welcome. So the first order of business is approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Trustee Reynolds, seconded by Trustee Pappen. Is there any discussion on our agenda tonight? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Do we have any declarations of possible conflict of interest tonight? Seeing none, we have no delegations, but we do have a presentation. Our first presentation is our oath and declaration of our two student trustees. Trustees Metropolitansky, I practiced this and I still, Metropolitansky and Trustee Hajali. So welcome, and I will turn it over to Associate Director Bo.
And if we could ask the trustees to stand, the student trustees to stand, please. And we'll ask you to read what's on your the sheet in front of you, and then
Separately.
Separately, yes, into the mics, and let's start with Zaid.
Okay, sure. I, Zaid Hajali, do solemnly declare that I am not disqualified under any requirement from being a student trustee member of the Halton District School Board, and I will truly, faithfully, impartially, and to the best of my ability execute the office of student trustee.
I, Dasha Metropolitansky, do solemnly declare that I am not disqualified under any requirement from being a student trustee member of the Halton District School Board, and I will truly, faithfully, impartially, and to the best of my ability execute the office of student trustee.
Great, and we'd ask you to sign on the dotted line there.
Great, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations. So welcome to the board, and we look forward to you being the voice of our students.
Thank you so much.
And we know you will have a very exciting year, I'm sure. So our next item of business is our second presentation, which is School Year Startup for the 2016-17 school year, and it's being put on by the School Operations Team, which is Superintendent Podra-Barrick, Superintendent Etoff, and his Superintendent. Oh, she's just doing lights, okay. Oh, you got promoted. Well, you may have done a better job, no. Welcome.
I just direct your attention to the slides. We just have some pictures scrolling just to give you a visual flavor to what we're going to share with you. September is a time of new starts for us in the Halton District School Board. We'd like to take a few moments to highlight some of the efforts across our system to welcome students into their new schools, and in some case to welcome families to a new country. As the photos scroll behind you, you will find that school efforts to welcome students reflect our HDSB values of creativity, empathy, collaboration, equity, and integrity. We want to highlight just a few of the successful initiatives across our system after the first few weeks of school. For one, welcome to kindergarten. This year, over 7,500 kindergarten students started school on the very first day, as we moved away from gradual entry practices. Schools adopted new and creative approaches to especially welcome families on the first day of school. As you know, this day is often more difficult for parents and grandparents than it is for the students. Many schools offered coffee and Kleenex times, had special welcome signs prepared for the students, t-shirts, meetings for families, and had extra staff on hand to welcome our youngest and newest learners on the first day. While a hectic and busy day, this new welcome tradition was very well received by families across our system.
Link Crew. This program trains our senior students in secondary schools to support the transition of our incoming grade 9 students. Each pair of senior students builds their group of 20 grade 9 students to welcome them to high school on day 1, and then subsequently they meet as a group every month over the course of the year to further develop the socio-emotional skills and other skills that will be necessary to be successful in their high school experience. Activities are designed to build a strong sense of belonging and encourage students to become involved in their school community, while also creating peer mentoring opportunities to work hard, to play nice, and to make a big difference. The mantra cry of Link Crew is yes, and total support, and lastly but not least, think big. The final highlight we'd like to draw your attention to is the work of our Welcome Center. Last year, we focused only on integrating secondary students. This year, we opened our doors to all incoming students. We registered approximately 700 new students through the Welcome Center during the period from mid-August until mid-September. The majority of these families are new to Canada. It was all hands on deck in order to process, assess, and provide the necessary orientation and settlement services to our newest members of the Halton District School Board. Staff worked extra hours in the evenings and on weekends to serve these families. Each newcomer family received assistance with full school registration, often in their first language if required, a presentation on the Ontario school system. High school students received assessment of language and math proficiency to determine course selection, and elementary school students received assessment of language proficiency to inform programming and support. If necessary, these families and students were linked to settlement services and workers who will follow up with them in the coming weeks to ensure that they are thriving in their new school and community. We'd like to thank all staff, volunteers, and community partners for doing such an exemplary job in ensuring that students across the Halton District School Board got off to an excellent start this past September. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I love the pictures. It really brought us a flavor of what happened in those first few days of school. And I know it's such a busy time. And thank you very much for giving us this snapshot. Trustee Daniele.
Thank you. Again, love the pictures, especially picture 32, I think it was, Brookville's newest Bengal. I loved that Brookville School had all of their kindergartens all in identical in shirts that said newest Bengals. So that one caught me, but slide number 14 was the one that I wanted to ask about. It was of a wall and all the different languages to say welcome. And I just wondered which school that was, because I thought that was just such an amazing representation of our inclusive culture.
Thank you. I believe they have a similar wall at Odnawi. Is there any other comments or questions for our speaker tonight, or speakers? Thank you very much for your presentation. It sets a very good tone for seeing how the year went, and I look forward to a really good school year this year. Thank you very much. So we have no other presentations tonight, so we are on to the ratification of the minutes from our board meeting of September the 7th, 2016. Can I have a mover to accept the minutes? Trustee Gray, seconded by Trustee Gravens. Is there any discussion on those minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. So we are now up to business transacted in private session, and I believe there are some items.
Yes, there are 2 items. The first is, be it resolved that the Halton District School Board appoint the architectural firm of Hossack and Associates Architects, Inc. to prepare the design and tender documents for the proposed new elementary school, ERA 118, Oakville Northeast No. 2 Public School, to be built in the Oakville area for September 2018. In the event that ministry approval is not received for this project, all expenses incurred for design and development of tender documents be funded through Close the Gap. And I so move.
Thank you, and I'm going to take the opportunity to second that. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Oh, sorry, I went the wrong way. I got so excited about getting a new school in Oakville. Okay, well, it's the first step. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. And another item?
Yes, the second item is, be it resolved that the Halton District School Board appoint the architectural firm of Hossack and Associates Architects, Inc. to prepare the design and tender documents for the proposed new secondary school, SRA 104, Milton Southwest No. 1 High School, to be built in Milton area for September 2019. In the event that ministry approval is not received for this project, all expenses incurred for the design and development of tender documents be funded through Close the Gap. And I so move.
Thank you, and seconded by Trustee Daniele. Is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Is there another item?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you. So we now move on to our order paper. Is there any comments or questions on our order paper tonight? Trustee Harvey Hope.
Thank you. Just a comment. If an item is shaded, can we note what report number and date, or if it doesn't have a report, what the date is completed? One of the items that I note on here is the motion about the OPSPA AGM funding, and the fact that it said the people would come back and give us an update, which off the top of my head I couldn't remember if we got yet or not. we haven't had that many meetings since then. But also an update on, at some point, since we made a motion to spend the money, that we get notification of how much was spent. So just to set up that process of, if we have a motion that says up to a certain amount, that at some point we get a reference back that says, yes, we spent this much, because it's coming out of the that ongoing fund of our professional development. So sort of a two-pronger to the two people who went to OPSBA. Are we going to be getting either a report or a verbal update? And then to Superintendent Veerman at some point, if we can get a acknowledgement of how much of the money we did spend.
Thank you. Trustee Oliver.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Given that we are looking at doing an evaluation of our special education programs, we have 4 motions in our order paper that relate directly to special education and various reviews. And I wonder if they will in fact form some of the evaluation questions. And if so, then would this be now treated differently? And you can give that some thought. It doesn't.
Associate Director Bogue or Superintendent Zonnefeld, would either of you be able to respond?
Through the chair, we're certainly looking at the scope of the review and wanting to be specific with the focus, because the breadth of our programming and services is quite large, and the review can't and probably shouldn't look at all aspects. So I guess I feel it would be premature on my part to say these are exactly the areas that we're going to focus on, because that's part of what we're going to determine with the consultants we're working with, and we're going to do that through a steering committee that's going to have trustees, a trustee, SEAC member and staff as part of that to get us, moving in a specific focus area. So, might some of these reports be touched upon by the review? Possibly, but I think it would be premature at this point to say.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions regarding our order paper tonight? Seeing none, we will then move into our action items for the evening. Our first action item is the item 3.4.1, the Code of Ethics Policy Feedback. Associate Director Bogue, report 16115 on page 12 of your board package. Associate Director Bogue.
And I think I don't really have any additional comments on this, Chair Amos.
I am going to put the motion on the floor. Be it resolved, the Halton District School Board approved the Code of Ethics policy as appended to report 16115. Moved by Trustee Gray, seconded by Trustee Pappen. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. So our next item, which is item 4.2.2, Weather Procedures Review, Trustees Grabentz and Graves, report 16126 on page 32 of your board package. Would one of you like to speak to it before I put it on the floor?
Point of order, you've missed 3.4.2.
Oh, thank you. I've jumped a whole bunch, didn't I? Thank you very much. That's why the confused faces. I'm moving the meeting along really quickly tonight. You're welcome. All right. Motion to adjourn. Did I hear that? 3.4.2, the board bylaw committees. Trustee Collard, report 16116, revised on page 14 of your board package. Trustee Collard.
Thank you. I did speak to this at our last meeting, and some revisions were made as a result of comments from trustees. I just wanted to add that the asterisks that you will see in Appendix D are not necessary in that appendix and will be removed by Ms. Gortmaker for us before that goes to the website. And I'm happy to make the motion to approve these changes to the bylaw.
Thank you. So I will put the motion on the floor. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board adopt the revised bylaws as appended to report 16116. Moved by Trustee Collard, seconded by Trustee Reynolds. Is there any discussion? Trustee Harvey Hope.
Stickler for grammar here, sorry, but it is, the motion is to adopt the revised bylaws. Is that because by changing this one section, we are changing all of them? And is there a way to note the fact that we are actually only changing one section? Because that motion's going to be the one that lives on.
Trustee Collard.
Yes, the bylaws is one document, so by changing one bylaw, we in effect change the bylaws, and the report speaks to the fact that it is the committee's bylaw.
I would agree with Trustee Collard because it is the bylaws. We're changing the whole.
So all of the pages will be updated to say September 2016? Or only this one?
I think it will have to say revised September 2016. Is there any other comments or questions on this before we vote? Seeing none. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Well, I know why you guys didn't want me to jump ahead, because then we'd miss the student trustee reports. Forget everything else. Well, welcome again to Trustees Metropolitansky and Trustee Hajali, and we look forward to your first student trustee report.
Perfect. So we're just going to kind of talk about what we've accomplished so far throughout our term and kind of our long-term goals and what we hope to accomplish by the end of our term. So the first thing that we did is we did compose and send out the letter to principals, informing them about student senate and how many representatives per secondary school as well as elementary school should be sent out to attend our meetings. So we're hoping to get a response back by September 30th for that. And our first meeting for Student Senate is actually on October 11th. So giving an update on that. Kind of for long-term goals and what we're kind of expecting, the first thing we want to look at is equity of access. So currently we have an issue regarding attendance for Student Senate. So we don't have the voice of the entire district school board due to the fact that we have schools up north that aren't able to attend our meetings because it's too long of a transportation issue. So just for that, I'm actually in contacts with Cisco Systems in order to get a sort of software that we can have remote meetings for anyone who's unable to attend the meeting. So that will allow us to have about 75 to 100 individuals actually attend our meetings. So in case we have people who are unable to attend or we have people up north who just can't attend the meetings themselves. So we're talking to that, and that will allow us for fluid communication with a multitude of people. So we're excited about that. Another thing we're talking about is HYLS, and that's going to happen more this springtime. And usually that's our Halton Youth Leadership Symposium. And usually we target both secondary and primary students, primary and elementary. But we found a slow decrease of interest from secondary students. So this year we're planning on focusing it just on elementary and having a portion just dedicated to secondary studies. So what to expect in high school, different programs, clubs they can get involved in, so things like that, and having motivational speakers about that.
The final thing about Student Senate is we want to really maximize student engagement this year, so that looks like a few things. The first is ensuring that student senators know that they're not just there for themselves, but they're there as representatives for their schools. So that means, for example, encouraging them to connect with their respective student councils. It means getting them to work in groups based on region, and perhaps for them to submit reports to us based on what they think is going on within their region, within their specific school. We plan on bringing what's being discussed at the board that's relevant to them to the student senators for their input. If there's specific policy being discussed that has to do directly with them, getting their input on those issues to really maximize their engagement. The final thing I want to talk about briefly is what we're doing with OSTA, so the Ontario Student Trustees Association. So I'm the president of the Public Board Council for the Ontario Student Trustees Association. That's one of the councils of OSTA, the second one being the Catholic Board Council. We're currently getting ready and we're planning our fall general meeting, the FGM, which is November 17th to 20th. Zaid and I will be attending that. We're in the process of planning it. It's the first conference of the year where all of the student trustees across Ontario will be meeting. Lastly, we're also talking with with OPSPA, which is the adult version of OSTA, of the Ontario Public School Board Trustees. And we're working with them extensively to see what we can do to bring a student voice to the Adult Student Trustees Association. So those are concretely what we're doing now, and in the long term what we hope to accomplish in our terms.
Thank you very much for your report. Is there any comments or questions for our student trustees tonight? Trustee Daniele.
Thank you very much. I look forward to it. It's going to be an exciting year this year. Just a couple points. I know you said you've spoken with Cisco. Have you also spoken with our own tech department? Because I know that several years ago, when Bruce Smith was our superintendent of IT, we had the equipment to do meetings up in the north, to run simultaneous meetings in several locations. So check and see what we've already got on board. When Superintendent Gord Truffin comes back, he would be the one able to help you with that. And I know we would welcome your voice at OPSPA. And the representatives of this board for OPSPA are Trustee Amy Collard and myself, so let us know what we can do to help.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions for our students trustees tonight on their report? Well, thank you very much for your report. I look forward to an exciting year. So our next items are, do we have any notices of motion tonight? Trustee Gerbentz.
Thank you, Chair Amos. Two notices of motion, basically. One is about forming a motion to ask the ministry to add programming, otherwise known as coding, to the Ontario curriculum. And the other motion, I should have that ready for the next meeting. And then the other motion is with regards to the flexible timetable program for high performers. I've discussed with a number of trustees about perhaps working on that motion between now and the next meeting.
So if you could forward those motions to Gail, and they need to be in by Wednesday at the end of the day? Yeah, next week. Is there any other notices of motion tonight? Seeing none, we will move on to our action items for October the 5th, which I already tried to go to once, didn't I? So, item 4.2.1, the Trustee Code of Conduct Feedback. Associate Director Bogue, Report 16127 on page 21 of your board package. Associate Director Bogue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The draft Trustee Code of Conduct policy is attached to this report. It has been posted for the required amount of time for public input, and there has been no response. So it's back for trustee discussion and action.
Thank you. Do we have any comments or questions for Associate Director Bogue? about this report. Trustee Collard.
Yes, thank you. At the OPSPA AGM, during one of the sessions that we had there, they discussed codes of conduct, and the feeling of member boards was that the bylaws was not the proper place for any part of the code of conduct to reside, that it should be in an administrative procedure as one document. And so I did bring that news back to trustees in June, but we had already voted to put it on the website. So I would entertain the consideration of making it into one document. And the Board of Directors at OPSPA also thought that it was okay to reference the bylaw, the code of conduct in the bylaws, but that the bylaws should not include the code of conduct. So I'm just bringing that information back from the AGM.
Thank you. Trustee Harvey-Hope.
Just to answer your question about that, I would be fine with it being in one document in a policy, not in an admin procedure. There is a discrepancy around the province on how they refer to admin procedures and whether or not some of their trustees find themselves bound by an admin procedure. But since we don't have any control over admin procedures, that would not be wise. Should be in the policy realm. My other comment would be, there have been in the last probably 24 hours a renewed look at, again, once more, this document by trustees, and just to note that there are some clarifications and housekeeping and grammar type issues that have been pointed out, so there will be some changes between now and in 2 weeks. I did have one that I was just wanting to try and clarify. In the commercial advantage section and some other places, it refers to friend, relative, and associate, business associate, yet it's not in the definitions. And maybe it's my background as a tax person, but business associate or friend, I'd like a little bit of a definition so one knows how broad that is. I have lots of friends, I have no idea what they're doing. So that, you know, you don't want to accidentally trip yourself up here. Also wondered whether or not the board resources for personal gain, perhaps we just need to clarify somewhere, maybe not in this document, but perhaps in the report, that does not preclude the board in our trustee expenses paying for things that you could stretch it to saying, well, if you don't pay for something, then you've gained because you otherwise would have paid for it. So there are some materiality type issues that may need to be sorted out. And then my final one is in the last paragraph. There's also something called related or associated, and that is definitely ringing bells for me because that's a defined term in the Tax Act, but I don't think that's what you mean. So also if we could maybe define what the trustee is related or associated. So in some cases we use for our pecuniary conflict of interest, we use parent, spouse, and child. This seems to be a little bit broader, so I'm not sure if that means greater than your immediate family. So if we could just nail down some of those, again, either in a definition or in the report that brings it to fruition somewhere so that it's recorded and not just in email chatter or explanations. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Gray.
Thank you, through the chair. On page 30 of our board package, under number 11, Director of Education, there's an indication that the director will provide trustees with a copy of this code and then secure a signature of this document. I'm not sure that it says anywhere how often that happens, whether it's once in a term or once every year, and I wondered if that should be clarified within this document.
I believe we did have some discussion around that, and it was once a term, but we never actually captured the intent. But that can be added. Trustee Harvey Hope.
Just another one of substance is the difference between the voting to the decision of whether or not there's been a breach in paragraph 8 and the voting for reconsideration. In the original voting, the trustee that brings the motion to the table does not vote. But in the second one, in the reconsideration, the trustee that brought the motion, brought the complaint may vote. And I just wondered if anybody had a explanation of why that's different, or
Trustee Collard, and I believe these were built on OPSPA's own model, and that's what we were pulling a lot of this information from. Trustee Collard.
That should be fixed to be the same. It's my error. May not. Yeah, it should be the same as the original.
So could we perhaps also on those two sentences add also may not vote, because saying the sentences twice, one after another, almost implies that one of them's wrong. No, I'm just saying when you read it once, the trustee who has the complaint against them may not vote, the trustee who brought the complaint may not vote. If you put a as well or also in there, it's very clear that neither one of the originating parties. Because when I read it, I thought, well, I wonder if it was an editing issue. So, thank you for the clarification. And one of the problems with taking a document from someplace else is that we don't necessarily bring the rationale of why something's in or out with our borrowing. And so if we can capture our understanding of why we did things the way we did them, then that will help. So in this case, I'm glad I asked, otherwise it may have.
Thank you. Trustee Graves.
Just want to indicate that I'm supportive of this coming back as a single document, and I too would recommend that it be in policy form when it comes back. And I was wondering if I could ask that if there are changes between now and when we see it at time for voting, that be indicated somehow.
Trustee Collard.
This is now in the domain of the Associate Director, and so I would volunteer to work with you on this if you like, but it doesn't come from trustees anymore. So I want to make sure that I don't step on toes by offering to help with the changes.
We'll take it away, and if I'm doing the editing, I'd be happy for some support.
Trustee Collard, did you have any? Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. In under Section 1 policy, the last sentence says, a code of conduct policy contributes to confidence in public education and respect for the integrity of trustees in the community. I was just going to say that I think it promotes these things only if people know and understand that this policy is in place. So I wonder about the opportunities that you may see in our regular ongoing communications, that something like this could find their way into something, if that makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments or questions on this, which will come back in 2 weeks as a revised report? Seeing none, then we'll move on to, just a minute. Now we're on to the Weather Procedures Review, Trustees Gerbentz and Graves, Report 16126 on page 32 of the board package. Would one of you like to speak to this? Trustee Gerbentz.
Yes, thank you, Chair Amos. I'm sure I know I was approached several times in the spring and this fall with regards to, parents calling with regards to the heat, the extreme heat that students were experiencing in their classrooms in schools that don't have air conditioning. And so we're hoping that I took this to the committee of the whole, and the committee decided that the best way to handle this at this point, in light of the fact that we don't have an actual policy for extreme heat, is to look at the current existing procedures that tie into the cold weather and see if we can expand it to include the heat as well.
Thank you. Did you want to add anything, Vice Chair Graves?
Just to add to that discussion, first, a little bit of a process piece. This is the first time that something has come up through a committee of the whole, and under advisement from the senior team, they felt that this was the best and the quickest way to bring it forward from committee of the whole. On the topic of the heat, we do have a guideline, but currently not a policy in the same way we do. So just wanted to make it clear that we do have guidelines in place. This is just looking at the possibility of formalizing it in a policy form.
Thank you. Now we have some comments or questions on this. So, Trustee Oliver.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Trustee Grabens. I'm very supportive of this work going forward. With the climate change, I think we'll be seeing a lot more of this type of weather, and it's important to address both the extreme cold and hot. I've had some questions from parents in my ward, and I've had some excellent feedback on the guidelines that we currently use at schools for the extreme heat. So this is very timely and important to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Harvey Hope.
Thank you. I also agree with Vice Chair Graves about we do have guidelines, but it'd be nice to standardize between the cold weather and the hot weather, seeing as how we seem to be getting both. But also just to reference that Executive Officer McFadden had talked to us about the fact that we have procedures and guidelines, and I'm not getting the terminology right, for our employees, and to reference those in with our policy on what we do with our students, and to make sure that they mesh. So just, I guess it's a heads up to the director or designate that does this work, that one would hope that the employee pieces are referenced in it. So as in, we would not expect our employees to do such and such, therefore we don't expect our students to be in the same classrooms. So having sat on some of the Joint Health and Safety Committee meetings, I know it came up a couple times of, this portable or that portable or whatever, cold, hot, whatever the situation was. So I know it does come up in the context of labor, and so we should be looking at it from the student's point of view, and some of them are actually at more risk because of their age, but just to make sure that we mesh the two, and also reference if the reason why we're doing something is a labor code. Okay.
Thank you. There are no further speakers to this item, so we will be returning to our next board meeting in 2 weeks. She does this to me. She sneaks in under the wire. Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had some assistance in that particular one. My question is, what is the timeline anticipated for a return back to the board with a report on this topic?
Actually not on the floor yet, so it could be a revised motion when it comes back with a, so I would suggest speaking to the associate director and director and ask what they thought is a reasonable timeline. Does that help, Trustee L. Harrison?
Yes, it helps immensely.
Thank you. And are there any other further comments or questions on this one tonight before we move on? Seeing no further? Okay. So we're now up to our information items for tonight. And our first item is the EQAO report. Associate Director Bogue, who is going to give us a presentation and share some of the results that were released today. And joining Associate Director Bogue are Superintendents Hutt-Gibbons and Salmini. Welcome, and when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's my pleasure to be here at the table to talk about EQAO results with my colleagues Superintendent Hutt-Gibbons and Superintendent Salmini. We've decided to look at this presentation a little bit differently this year because we have done this year over year, and some of the feedback from trustees suggested that perhaps an alternate approach, this might look a little bit different for you. So we'll appreciate any feedback that you might have and what you might be able to give to us. So rather than walking through each and every assessment and the data there, you've got that as a backup slide deck, and we're happy to talk to or respond to any questions that you've got from that data as well. But we will be providing sort of a high-level overview of the EQAO for this presentation. So I think we'll just get right into it. So you've seen this slide here before. This is just here again as a refresher. This slide shows that Halton is outperforming the province in all assessment areas. And in fact, we'll look at this a little bit more later on, but in fact, even where we've had a drop in Halton, the province has dropped by a larger amount. So when we look at that gap between province and HDSB, it's been another successful year for the Halton District School Board. We can see when we look at a couple of areas, junior mathematics in particular, there's some areas for growth, and we look at some other areas that we'll touch on through the presentation, primary reading, for example, primary writing, and some of the junior reading and writing where we've got consistently very high results, and in some cases the highest ever within the Halton District School Board. For example, here's primary reading. And so these are the graphs that you're accustomed to seeing at this kind of presentation. It shows the constant trend up and to the right, which is what we like to see. We've got a gap in the data. Trustees are aware that there was no administration of the grade 3 and grade 6 EQAO assessments last year due to job sanctions. And then there's our dot on the right-hand side, and again, our highest result in primary reading and significantly above the province. So these are just a few examples of some sort of areas that are noteworthy. And I'll just let you read those. I won't read them for you. Areas to celebrate and some areas of focus as well. Again, we've talked a little bit about math, and you'll hear a little bit more about mathematics. Two of the areas on that previous slide are just represented here, and just to kind of emphasize our English language learners, which we've got quite an extensive support system in place for those kids right from the time that they arrive with us, sometimes through the Welcome Center, and through programming. We see that the gap is very, very small or negligible or not even there for our English language learners. And an area of focus for us is special education. So on the right slide, and I just took junior reading as an example, but this trend seems to carry through most of the slides where our English language learners are pretty much at par with the rest of the population. But we've got some lagging results in special education, and that's been an area of focus and will continue to be an area of focus for us. So those are two areas that I just wanted to highlight for trustees.
Okay, and now up on the screen you can see some information about our grade 9 applied mathematics, and what you see here has to do with the significant value added, just about 40% in the cohort tracking from the grade 6 to the grade 9. So while yes, there is very targeted work to do in the grade 6, we can also celebrate the fact that the gap is closing when we look at those students and they're moving forward to their grade 9 mathematics. So if you were looking at that and you look at the rows to standard and you subtract the dropped from standard, you're left with the value added, and that's 39%. So can you go to the next one, Dave? So then when we look at this further and we're looking at those going into academic, the 10% in the grade, this is the same age group of students, grade 3 to grade 6 reading, and we see a net gain of 10%. We do see a net loss of 18% in that grade 3 to 6 mathematics, and we see that loss across the province as well, so hence our math plan, both provincially and as a board, in order to really look at that group. But we also see a net gain of 14%. So in the academic students, as we're moving from the grade 6 to the grade 9. And so I remind you that that's 90% of students in academic grade 9 math performing at or above level. So if we want to think of actual real numbers, it's just about 500 of the 2,950 students in this cohort data who actually rose to standard by the time they hit grade 9 in mathematics.
And the data that you're looking at right now is comparison data for the elementary assessments, primary and junior. And it's comparing to the last time that we had assessment data, which was in 2013 and 14. And so of note, as you look through the categories, that we've either gone up or down a few percentage points, and that's comparable to what has happened in the province. Also of note, as has already been mentioned, is that we are above in all categories in comparison to the province, and that we celebrate that we have the highest results in grade 3 reading and in grade 6 writing.
And again, if we're just looking at the secondary school information, and showing the increase to the board compared last year, or, you know, we see a flat line. So results have been fairly consistent in secondary. So grade 9 applied mathematics, just a slight gain, and the academic and the literacy test has been flat. And then you can see on the far column how that compares to the provincial data, which is an increase of 10% for the applied mathematics, and then the 7 in the academic and 4 in the literacy test. So that's just charting out the specifics of the secondary data.
This is really important data for our schools, and this is an example of what a school would get in terms of student perceptions. And we believe that that behavioral data, that attitudinal data, is really important to access student voice and to do the planning that we need to do at the school level. So students are asked questions like, do I like to read, or I like math, and they indicate whether it's most of the time, sometimes never, or not a response. And so for a school like this example, you would note that the vast majority are saying that they at least like reading and math most of the time, and sometimes. If the data didn't indicate that, then a school would use that to really tap into finding out why are students saying that and what kinds of interventions and plans can they put in place. New this year, as you'll see at the bottom, we're also getting data about how are students reading online, how much time they're spending reading online, and also how much time they're spending writing in social media. And that's very valuable data for schools too. In this school's example, we would note that the vast majority of students are spending 1 hour or more reading and writing in those ways. And so that has implications for the kinds of learning that we structure in schools for students in terms of making it an engaging environment. So we do use EQAO data to help inform the systemic plans that we create for improvement. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about literacy first and then about mathematics. So in terms of our literacy plan, we have noted that we have best ever results for grade 3 reading and for grade 6 writing. And we attribute much of that to the literacy plan that we've had in place and to the goal that we had in our previous multi-year plan around early reading. And so our plan is to continue the good work that we've been doing in terms of things like the level of literacy intervention that's in every elementary school, system-level professional development that is very precise in terms of strategies, common strategies across divisions, school-based monitoring strategies where we really have engaged staff in spending time looking at individual kids and monitoring achievement for individual kids and making good decisions in terms of how to support their next learning step. Staff resources. So our learning resource teachers are an invaluable resource to us in our schools and in our system. And so in terms of the literacy plan, we are proud of the continued growth that we have seen, and we plan to move forward with a similar plan. In terms of mathematics, and the question is, so what is the plan? We are very pleased in Halton that we have a solid math plan. We're in year 3 of that plan. In addition, this year we're in year 1 of the renewed math strategy plan that is provincial. And so we've tweaked and revised our plan to make sure that we have the ministry directives and priorities in place in our plan. And here's where we want to talk about the successes that we've had in literacy in a little bit more detail. We're going to build our plan and continue to build our plan around those successes. We know that in literacy, we had a sustained focus over a longer period of time, and we stayed the course and we stayed focused on our plan, and we were very precise and intentional, and that is our plan for math as well. We know that as a province and as a board, we haven't been focused on mathematics nearly as long as or to the extent that we have in literacy, and our results would show us that if we stay the course and if we have solid plans, that we can see improvements in student achievement. So we are going to definitely build on the successes we've seen in literacy. In addition, we have a math lead in every elementary school, whether that's in the form of an in-school math coach or access to one of our board coaches, or a lead teacher that's going to be provided with 5 days of professional learning for themselves as the lead teacher and additional days to use back in the schools with staff as the lead teacher. So we're very excited about that initiative. We have resources in every school, and so we want to, including intervention with our leaps and bounds, and we want to continue implementation of the use of those resources. We have board-sponsored additional qualifications courses planned. We have system, school, and classroom professional learning opportunities, and really intentional learning for students with learning disabilities. This is a big focus for us in terms of moving forward with our math plan, and that's a K-12 focus. And then we have our applied learning strategy in secondary schools, also focusing on students in those classes and how can we be very precise and intentional in knowing what their learning needs are and starting with those needs and then building plans that will support each learner and differentiate for them.
Okay, I know you can't possibly see that small print there, the pictures, but it gets to the question, how do we use the information that we get from EQAO? We use it extensively, and we use it to complement our own information and to go forward accordingly. So the students all get their own report so that parents can then look at and provide their own supports. Then we take it at a school level, and you'll see principals sharing that out with their own communities, but looking at trends over, say, a 5-year rolling average, or looking to see what strategies have worked, modifying their school improvement plans based on what they're seeing. Superintendent Salmini's already mentioned the attitudinal data that we get from the surveys that students complete when they finish the assessment. They do a survey around attitudes with regards to mathematics, reading, and writing. That data is also compared over time, and we put that all together with all of our data and our research department. And we use that to inform our plans, both in the classroom, at the school level, and at the board level, where you would see that translated into, say, for instance, the program department, where Tina and I are, where that is driving the decisions and the resources that is going into that in order to make those targeted high-yield strategies a reality, so that we can ensure that we are moving ahead and closing the gap for all students.
Just as a final comment, just to remind trustees that we'll be coming back to talk about the operational plan and the student portion of the operational plan. And so you've got a bit of a snapshot of our literacy and mathematics plans that we'll be doing. We'll be bringing back lots more detail on what we're doing to address this data. And this is just one piece of data, of course. This is EQAO, one piece of data. We've got lots of other achievement data and other data that our schools collect. So we'll be giving you a lot more detail around our plan and our response for student achievement in the operational plan. And we'd be happy to answer any questions that trustees might have.
Are there any comments or questions on the presentation on EQAO tonight? I'd like to thank you very much for your presentation. It's been a very good snapshot of what has happened in our system. And there are a couple questions, but I just wonder, in one of the future presentations, are we going to be actually looking at numbers? Because I know for grade 9 academic that we have a great majority of our students actually there as opposed to applied. So a 1% increase in applied actually may be significant if it's only a small number of students compared to the actual number that are in academic.
Chair Amos makes a very good point. So if we break it down in last year's writing in the grade 9 mathematics, there were approximately 3,300 students who wrote the academic mathematics assessment versus about 650 who wrote the applied. And thus, when you are looking at that small group and a very small cohort within the applied, then you can see very large swings in the percentage when you're looking at percentage reaching or exceeding the provincial standard just by few students skewing those results. So true.
So is that something we're going to get more information on, like the actual numbers? Because that actually makes a difference, right, in our results. I mean, the fact that we have a 90% rate of grade 9 academic in math is actually huge, because that's a huge majority of our students.
Chair Amos, in the other slide deck that we shared with trustees as background information, we've got numerical data. We're happy to respond to those questions. If you haven't had a chance to go through that in detail, you could email us information as well, or questions as well.
No, I'm just
Happy to
saying
respond.
because the public needs to know that our results are, I mean, a majority of our students are doing that well, is what I'm saying. It's not a 50-50 split or something. And so I just don't want, I mean, I think there needs to be some explanation behind some of the numbers of what I'm saying. A little bit, not much, because we don't want to. But anyways, I'll let the list start. Trustee Daniele.
Thank you very much. Third-term trustee, I see this presentation every year, and I want to say kudos to you. This is probably the best, most comprehensible and user-friendly presentation of this data that we've seen. So, and I know that took a good deal of effort, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Vice Chair Graves.
Thank you. Excellent presentation, and I really like the slide that focuses on student perceptions, because I do feel that they were at least equal, if not perhaps more important than the achievement. In many ways, students do not go on in mathematics unless they enjoy it. So I'm glad we continue to keep an eye on those numbers. I was wondering if there's any feedback to the ministry on that new part. I do like that they are trying to incorporate questions about how much students are reading online, because I do think a lot of things are going online, regardless of what the answer is. My suggestion to them, perhaps through you, if you have the opportunity, is that I think some of the social media that they list directly is from an adult perspective, yeah, you noticed that too. Twitter and Facebook are people our age use. The younger people are using different social media. And I also feel that a gap that they're missing too is the chats from online gaming. Even to include Minecraft in this, I think you'd see a significant increase in the amount of writing that students are doing in that piece. I feel like they caught it in the reading to a certain extent, but they missed it in the writing. And then my true question is, given the success of the LLI, I feel, is what you're talking about in terms of a math strategy, does it include something similar or equivalent to that?
So that's a very good question. We do have a resource out in our system called Leaps and Bounds, which is an intervention strategy which enables teachers to be able to assess students and pinpoint where they might be having difficulties and then choose strategies to help. So we do have that resource out in the system and are doing professional development with our teachers around how to effectively use that. So that is one piece that already exists. In addition, we are really talking about partnering with student services and focusing on students with identified special needs and what that looks like and how can we use our tools and profiles that we have to plan intentionally for those students and make a difference. So there are certainly intervention pieces in our plan.
And Trustee Graves, we certainly can provide that feedback on the social media questions to AQAO. If trustees recall, last year you had some suggestions as well that I did pass along to them, and they were quite receptive. So we'll pass that along as well.
Thank you. Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, it's just a process question. Will the presentations be posted for public consumption following the meeting tonight?
The intent was to post this particular presentation, absolutely, and the other presentation was really for trustee information. I'm not sure, we hadn't intended to post that one. Oh, thank you. My colleagues here reminded me also that the infographics that went out with the media releases have some of that, that quantitative data for the other assessments as well, and that is out in the public domain.
Trustee Gray.
Thank you, through the chair. I'd like to piggyback on Trustee Daniele's comments about the excellence of this report and the data that we get from this. But I think in looking past the data, I think we need to give kudos to the entire system, the strong leadership that we have in developing plans that are going to improve our literacy and math scores, to the system of teachers who work so hard in the professional development, to the parents who are supportive of the initiatives that we undertake, and to the students themselves who work very, very hard to improve. I noted in slide 13, in terms of the mathematics plan, that one of the things maybe that could be added there, or maybe not, but was the types of programs that we offer in the summer. And my question is that there is a grade 7 and 8 English and Math remedial program, and also this year a transition to high school math program that was operated out of 2 schools. My question is, are we gathering data, or will we plan to gather data on those students who participated in those programs, and with a view towards acknowledging that they're highly successful, they make a difference, and that these programs should appear in many, many more schools?
Thank you for that. We are actually very much tracking the data, and I can share that Hayden had 150 students attend in the summer, and that says an awful lot, because the incentive it's not a summer job. They're there because they wanted to be there. And so we're looking at schools that did run this successfully and with large numbers, and we're looking at expanding this because certainly we need to do everything we can all year round. And if students are willing to come in the summer, which they demonstrated this summer very much so that they are willing to come, then we're going to continue to look for and expand opportunities for that to occur.
And seeing no further speakers on this topic tonight, I'd like to thank you very much for your presentation. I know that there's a lot of really good data here, and it'll be being looked at and dissected and pulled apart and being part of our multi-year plan. So thank you very much, and I know that all trustees will be making sure that they share this information with their communities. So now we will move on. Summer Learning Initiatives, Associate Director Bode, Report 16120 on page 33 of your board package. Associate Director Bode.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, this is a little bit of a change of pace for trustees. We typically do a more fulsome presentation on our summer learning initiatives, summer school and traditional summer school and anything else that's happening in the summer. This is a bit of a change, and so again, we'd really appreciate the feedback from trustees. You've got the report in front of you. It's very much modeled on years gone by, so it's got data, lets you know where summer school is offered, numbers of kids and those kinds of things. I did want to highlight for trustees 3 items in the report and keep my remarks to just those particular highlights because these are changes from last year. So first, we offered summer school in Georgetown. This is the first time in as long as I can remember that we've offered summer school up in Georgetown, and it's been part of our conversation around equity and equity of access, and we hear from our families in the far north, up in the hills there, that it's really difficult to access services when they have to come down to Milton or down to South Halton. So that's been a huge success. We've offered both grade 7 and 8 mathematics and English and some high school credits in Georgetown, and the numbers look really solid. So we will be planning to do that again next year. The International Language Program, again, relatively newish in terms of the numbers. We've had international languages offered for some time during the school year and at summer school, but if you look at the data in the report, you can see that the numbers have doubled in the last 2 years, and that's a sign of our changing demographics, but it's also, I think, a testament to some of the really good work that Tara Connor, the principal of Gary Allen High School, has done in terms of promoting that program in the community. Another board nearby has had the market share on those programs, and we've really captured the kids and the families in our community. And then lastly, again, this is a theme that you'll hear for years to come, I think, is online learning, both in our day school programs and also in summer school. You can see the numbers there, again, continue to grow and grow and grow. And I just highlight that because I think that's got big implications for our high schools. You know, particularly we heard the report earlier around an architect coming in to design a high school. If students are not in classes in the traditional way any longer, then the notion of a classroom and how many classrooms do schools need, and if their kids aren't in class, where are they? Are they in the cafeteria? Are they at home? Are they in the hall, in chill spaces, and so on? It's going to have some implications on how we look and feel in our secondary schools coming forward. So I'm happy to answer any questions that I can from trustees.
Thank you. We do have some comments or questions for you tonight. So first up is Trustee Oliver.
Thank you. Through your chair to Associate Director Bogue. I love the idea of the International Languages Elementary Program, and I'm wondering if you could just tell us how you select the languages that the program is offered in, the choice of languages. And my second question is around point 1 in the highlights, which states that secondary summer school enrollment continues to increase significantly. And I'm wondering if this is students who are returning to redo a credit or are taking new courses. And I'm also wondering if for the ones that are returning to redo a credit, if we have kind of an analysis of the student profile that might help to have an intervention before that's required for future utility.
I think there's 3 questions there, but you might have to remind me if I stray. Around international languages, that's a great question. We offer whatever people want. So we need a core group of students. We need to have a minimum class size. I think it's about 14 to break even with the funding from the ministry. So if we have a language group that comes to us to say, we'd like to offer a language in X, we say, have we got the kids? Have we got enough kids to form a critical mass? Can we find a teacher? And if that's the case, those are the only 2 requirements. We find a location, we do a hiring process for the teacher, and we run the class. These are not for credit, for grades, that sort of thing. So it's very much fluid. And in terms of teachers, these are not necessarily Ontario College teachers. That might be a parent in the community that would like to teach and that has a passion for language and that sort of thing. So it's really based on demand. We've got lots of different cultures and languages in our community, but unfortunately, kids were going elsewhere for those programs, and now we're being able to retain them. So that's been a positive piece.
Just have a follow-up to that part of the question.
Go ahead.
That's, sorry, thank you, Chair. And that's to just under clarification around, is this, so this grouping of students, are they all at the same level of proficiency, or is there mix?
It depends. I mean, for a program that's just starting, I would say that we've got probably a very broad range. So the first time we offered pick a language, it was probably one single class. As we get more kids and more different levels of proficiency, then we can start to group kids. We don't necessarily group them by grade like we would in a traditional school. It might be more different kinds of groupings based on their proficiency, that sort of thing. More kids we have, the better that we can group them in terms of age grouping so that they're relatively the same age, that sort of thing. But it's very flexible, and really the teachers on the ground make those kinds of decisions in terms of how they're going to group kids and that sort of thing.
And the second question was around profile of the students who are entering summer school, the secondary students.
Yeah, so in secondary students, we offer full credit courses, and those could be a whole range of students that are potentially reaching ahead, that are keen to get another credit under their belt, to students that have failed a credit. And maybe failed significantly, that they would need to go and repeat the entire credit. We do have credit recovery in summer school, which is a 2-week course instead of the month. And so those are kids that typically, have been through the credit, were not successful, but maybe don't need to do the entire course again. And so we'll collect data from their home school in terms of what are the areas that they weren't successful in, and the program would be focused to those particular needs. Often there's been a whole lot of work that's happened at the home school already in terms of credit recovery and the student success room and maybe special ed support, all kinds of things usually have happened for those kids. But at the end of the day, if their mark was 42 or something like that, they could do a credit recovery credit at summer school in a 2-week block.
Thank you. Trustee Gray.
Thank you, through the chair. I'd like to acknowledge and thank you for mentioning that the addition of Georgetown as a summer school site made quite a difference in that 85 elementary students and 120 secondary students were able to attend in their community. And I think that was really large. And I think it's the beginning of a critical mass. I think this being the first year, the word will be out. I'm glad it's going to return. I think it'll be even larger next year. I did hear from members of the community about the fact that numerous courses had to be shifted down into Milton because there were not enough students to support a standalone course. And my question would be, is there opportunities, or would there be opportunities in the future for those students to be transported to Milton, or is that something that we do for students that can't get the program within their community? The second question I would have would be, are there opportunities to grow the summer school opportunities for youth? Example, the award program and also the grade 8 transition to high school math program.
So I'm going to leave the last two to Superintendent Salmini and Hunt Gibbons. Just to comment around the Georgetown site, and unfortunately, we need a critical mass of students, and I think the number's in and around 16 for credit courses to be able to break even. We could look at lots of creative things in terms of where the course is offered. Transportation is always a challenge in the summer because that's not part of the funding. The other thing that we do is that we coordinate with our coterminous board quite often on courses. Now, I'm not sure that they've got anything offered in Georgetown or Halton Hills either, so that's the challenge there. I do agree with your comments, absolutely. My guess is that the numbers will likely be double next year in Georgetown because this sort of just went out word of mouth. It hasn't historically happened, and so I was really pleased with the numbers. And if we can, even add another 100 students, that means we will have some critical masses to be able to offer more and more in Georgetown.
Go ahead.
So I'm going to comment on the Award Summer Learning Program. Certainly, it's a very good point. We have currently 3 sites, and we would like to look at expanding to have a 4th site in Halton Hills if possible. First step would be to secure the funding through code again, and then to review what we've been doing to see how we can spread that budget to include another site. But we certainly are going to be looking into that.
And I would just add that funding is based on enrollment, and as students are signing up for these courses, then we're providing them and hiring the teachers to put in front of them. And we're also expanding the e-learning offerings as well, and working creatively to ensure that if a student wants to take something in the summer, that there's something there for them to participate in.
Okay. Thank you. Trustee Collard.
Thank you. I always like getting this report. This is one of the best reports that we get every year because every year we see more and more success. And I think it really speaks to the commitment and dedication of our students that they're willing to attend summer school, whether it's to reach ahead, to recover a credit, or to redo a credit that they had difficulty with in the past. But I find it very exciting that we're doing the languages. This is something that goes above and beyond what most boards offer. And just the fact that we are offering 11 languages, and it's not credit bearing, but that we're able to do that in our community, I think it's wonderful. And it speaks to the welcoming environment of Halton and the multicultural nature of our demographic. So I'm very pleased to see that we're doing that, and I would just like to thank you very much for this report.
Thank you. Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair. I echo everyone's thanks for the report and all of the good work that goes on behind the report to make it happen. I have 3 questions. Question number 1 is, are the class sizes, do they conform to the rest of the school year class size caps and rules?
No, they don't. There's not exactly, but I would say in general, class sizes are usually, for credit courses in summer school, our class sizes are very typical of what they would be in a regular class. So, anywhere from 20 to 30 students. Our international language programs, again, I think 14 is the minimum, but they're probably, 16 to 18, that sort of thing. In our grade 7 and 8 remedial classes as well, again, 16 to 20 kids, that sort of thing. So they're not that different from the day school, but the way the funding happens is they are funded quite different. So and there are not the same kinds of parameters in place as kids on a day school register.
Excellent, thank you. I have 2 more questions. The first one is, has there ever been any consideration given to adding French to the International Languages program, especially in light of the program viability and strengthening core French? And I wonder whether that may be another opportunity that some of our families may be interested in. And then the last question is there any distinction that we know of in the way that these courses, the secondary courses, are reflected to and viewed by colleges and universities, i.e. are they viewed in an equal and reflected in an equal way to the regular day school classes?
The French question first, because French is one of our national languages. It's deemed not an international language, and so it's actually just not eligible for international languages programs. It's a great idea, though. We could offer something like that, but there would be no funding behind it, right, from the ministry. So that would be a bit of a challenge. In terms of the credit, the course codes that kids earn in summer school, they would be considered on par with courses earned on a day school register.
Thank you. Trustee Oliver.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Associate Director. I also really like this report, and And so I just want to make sure that my question is really answered. I don't think I got the answer I was looking for or wanting to hear or listening for. Highlights point 1 around secondary summer school enrollment continues to increase. I'm guessing that it continues to increase because we have students who are reaching ahead and taking new credits. Because if that's not the case, then it would suggest something different and worrisome. So I just want to know if you can confirm that for me, and if not tonight, then later.
Yeah, I don't have data at that level with me tonight, and I could certainly dig into that a little bit, but I can tell you that if we look at our enrollment over time, we have been on an upward slide. Not slide, but growth, I guess, and it's probably been not much different than our growth in Halton. So that would be one piece. I can tell you that the online adds so much more flexibility for kids that certainly can be attributed to much of the growth. And I think in the graph there you can see where the online is going, up. So that's a big piece. And I would also add that the Georgetown, and we're going to try to collect this data this year, but the Georgetown site added another 125 kids or something like that in secondary. That honestly, I don't think we captured those kids before. Many of them would not have been able to get cells to go. So that would be probably a plus of about 100 kids anyway, or maybe even 75 of them would not have been in our stats from last year. So those would be the big pieces. I don't think that there's anything like a significant change in terms of the number of students that might be doing credit recovery and those kinds of things.
Thank you. And my second question is for the International Languages Program, is there, do we have a partnership with our coterminous board? Do they offer such program?
They do offer many of the same languages. We don't have a partnership, and in some ways it's kind of a healthy competition. In a perfect world, our students would attend our program, but they don't. They can move back and forth even though there's not a formal partnership in place. If one of the Catholic school boards is offering a school and it's closer to your home, kids are welcome to go there. And just like in summer school, actually, they go back and forth.
Thank you. Trustee Harvey-Hope.
Thank you. I echo the idea that it's wonderful to have all this summer learning. Sounds like we're creeping forward to a pilot project for full year school. But my question is transportation and credit courses for secondary, and wondered whether we do any kind of a survey of, one, the timing, since I seem to recall summer school being 8 a.m. till 1 or something, which can be problematic if you're trying to get across the region. Even if you can find a parent to drive you, that can be really early, a lot earlier even than they're going to high school during the year, and we've been talking about late starts. So I'm wondering whether they do some kind of a survey that says, how much trouble did you have getting here, or how do you get here, or if you can't get your credit in Oakville and you have to get to Burlington, you can't get from one to the other. Transit systems just don't connect between the two municipalities very easily. So wonder if we're collecting data on that, and at some point even a pay-for bus kind of concept, because of the fact that the transit systems don't seem to be working with us very well on that.
I can certainly take that back. We can have a look at that. I thought you were going to suggest that maybe the timing was difficult from 8 until 1. And we have had that conversation over the years many, many times. And earlier is better, obviously, for kids because they're working. But it might pose a challenge on the other side, right? But we'll take that. I'll take that information back.
Thank you. I do not see any other speakers on this topic tonight. I'd like to thank you very much for your presentation. As I heard one of my colleagues say, this is always a great report, and it also shows some of the initiative of the students who want to continue learning, even when it's supposed to be a time for break, and either it's a time of reflection and improvement, or sometimes getting ahead. But it's it's exceptionally exciting to me to see the number of online numbers that keep going up, and I believe that that's going to continue as a trend all year. Thank you. So the next item is the capital update. Superintendent Cullen, report 16125 on page 40 of your board package.
Thank you, Chair Amos. I think we had this report just a short time ago to cover off one of our earlier updates. I don't believe there's a lot that has changed other than I should comment or draw the trustees' attention to the portables. We've positioned all of the portables that had been identified as being needed in the system in the spring. We've since that time approved 9 additional portables to be located. They're listed in the report. And as we identify the availability of the portables, some are coming from the leasing company, some are coming from our own sources, they will be relocated to those locations noted on the chart tonight. Some of them may not receive all of their portables right away. Some of them are in urgent need of instruction spaces. So we'll be positioning possibly 2 in some of the cases where schools have been approved for 3 right away, only because of the timing of the availability of the portables to go there, and then the 3rd would be arriving at a later date. Happy to take any questions related to the portables or any other element of the capital update. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your report. Is there any comments or questions for Superintendent Cullen on this tonight? Trustee Harvey Hope.
Thank you. The capital update has a note about the administrative building accommodation study, which I note on the board report is coming later. But I'm wondering at what point in the timeline does the use of trustees and how we would like to use a potential building is going to be factored in or studied, or whether or not where that input comes.
Thank you for that. There is a report scheduled to come, and that will basically inform the board of where we are in terms of the concepts, the location conversation, and the funding. They'd be the primary ones at this point in time. We've also arranged to have a meeting very shortly to talk about some of the location issues and overall issues related to the board office with some of the ministry staff that should move us along to the next step. And as you'll recall from the previous one, it was a location conversation. So that's one of the big ones that'll be coming back very soon. And sorry, to answer your question then, at that point, I suspect once we have an intent, an approval, a direction, and a location, I think would be the appropriate time to start thinking about exactly what it becomes.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers, thank you very much for your report tonight, Superintendent Cullen. Now, I was going to have a 2-minute break, but as I'm anticipating there's only like 15 minutes left in the meeting, as long as we're all concise, I'll leave it to have a discussion at our next committee of the whole meeting so that we can, because I've had a few requests to have it, so just so I put it out there. Okay, our next item is Administrative Procedure Update. Associate Director Bogue, report 16124 on page 43 of your board package. Associate Director Bogue.
Thanks, Madam Chair. There are 2 admin procedures attached to this report, pediculosis and board planning and preparation schedule. And there are folks around the outer ring, and myself would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. And there are a couple of questions, I believe. Trustee Gerbentz.
Thank you, Chair Amos. Okay, so what is our rationale for excluding children from school if they have head lice? Considering head lice is not an illness, head lice is only transferable through direct contact, head to head or head to item, hats and brushes, and they cannot jump from head to head. That head lice carries a stigma that may induce shame in affected students and bullying behavior in others, and that it is difficult for families, especially lower income or families with precarious job situations, to meet the criteria for students returning to school, specifically getting checked by WeCare. Getting checked specifically by a single provider that travels around the region can be difficult if transportation is unavailable. are students being left unsupervised at home until treatment or a lice check is more accessible during a parent's day off, or if a lice checker is closer to their location? And is our policy putting students at risk of being excluded for unnecessary or unintended extended periods of time?
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm going to look over to Superintendent Pennyfather. I think there was about 8 questions in there, Trustee Grevents. So I lost track, but Mr. Pennyfather will have them, I know.
Good questions. First of all, the rationale originally for excluding students due to head lice was to contain the spread. You talk about head-to-head contact. That's actually a fairly typical activity of students, especially in the primary junior ages, head-to-head to read a book, head-to-head to look at a PSP, head-to-head to when they're playing sports and that kind of thing. So there is that spread. Historically, I am told that this policy came into place because parent input in the past has been that they didn't want their children in an environment where head lice existed and was not being addressed. And also, there was the concern that parents would keep the students home if they knew that the lice was there and it was not being addressed. So, on the next point, the new admin procedure was reviewed last year by the Equity and Inclusive Education Advisory Steering Committee, and it was partly because some of the things some of the issues that you raised. One thing was that in the evening, if a parent wanted to take a child to be checked, they couldn't go to our normal provider, and then they'd have to go to a medical practitioner, and that was feedback that was given. Also, the board had received some feedback from medical practitioners that doctors really don't want to be doing that, and it's not part of their normal practice. And the parents did raise the concerns about trying to connect with the provider and also not being able to access other lice removal services. Interestingly, the idea of the exclusion wasn't disputed that much, from what I'm told. The new administrative procedure allows our contracted service provider to utilize trained personal service workers, hopefully allowing them to provide more service in peak times, so less running around. It also outlines steps to provide accommodations for children that have head coverings for religious reasons. We thought that we needed to update the policy for that reason so that and you brought up the idea of stigma and kids being picked on, that kind of thing. We wanted to make sure that this issue is handled sensitively, and that's something that wouldn't have come up when the policy was made before. And also, being able to use personal service workers allows the potential for parents to access other lice check services in the evening, provided that they have a trained personal service worker with a lice agency. Did I get them all?
Thank you very much, Superintendent Pennyfather.
Thanks.
Trustee Cullen.
I'm going to jump to the other administrative procedure. And I just wanted to mention that Superintendent Zonnefeld did present this to SEAC last Tuesday, and there was some conversation and discussion about the dates. They've already started putting plans together as to how to meet those dates so that the board can have the special education plan at the second meeting in March, and that we might have an extra meeting in February in order to do that. And so there was a lot of really constructive conversation around it. And I believe that Superintendent Zonnefeld will be open to suggestion at the next meeting as well. I think there was perhaps an opportunity for more discussion.
Thank you. Trustee Daniele.
Thank you very much. It's funny because this was a discussion the other day at Brookville School Council. It came up, and I quizzed the parents because there had been some lice outbreaks, and I quizzed the parents about whether they would want their children to stay at home until, and unanimously they said absolutely, that they would want their children removed from the class until such a time. So it's kind of interesting to hear the different feedbacks that we're getting. But my point, one of the things they brought out on the first page of this, it says in the case of a large outbreak of head lice in a school, it's recommended the principal notify all parents by letter. And I do note that Appendix B is a sample letter to go out to parents and guardians. But the concern that was raised by these parents is when is it considered a large outbreak? Because there was a lice found in their children's class and they weren't informed. So I'm just, it seems a little loose to me there as to when parents do get informed or when they don't. And I'm just wondering if there's a reason why it's as vague as it is there, or if, what can we tell parents about this? Because there were very serious concerns raised that a child within their child's class had head lice and they weren't informed in any way.
That's a really good question, Trustee Daniel. I'm just looking around to see if anybody has an answer. It's kind of it's kind of, how do you interpret large, right? And that's a. Is there a number there? Why don't we take that back, Trustee Daniele? Because in fact, Superintendent Pennyfather has already let me know that there's actually a couple additional changes to be made. This one's probably going to come back to the board. We didn't want to pull it from the agenda because there was lots of great questions. So we'll take that feedback back and have a look.
Thank you. Trustee L. Harrison.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I too have heard very divergent opinions, mostly strong, from community members. My questions are, at what point does a child who has head lice, the parent is called, do they just go home at the end of the day with a letter and a phone call, or are they removed at the moment that it's identified? And then my other question is, stalling for time. Yeah. Do we also, was the medical officer of health or somebody from the region involved in those conversations? Because as I did research on their website, as Trustee Grabentz pointed out, they do have very clear statements that it's not a medical issue, it's not a disease spreading incident and so on. And further on their website, they, I believe, send people to a staff person that's no longer with the board. So there may be some merit, if they haven't been looped into the conversation, just for that to happen.
Through the chair. Yeah, thanks, first of all, for pointing that out. There is lots of conversation back and forth between public health and our board, especially in this season. Their role is outlined there as giving us information and giving information to parents should they want it. It is, the medical opinion is that this is not does not cause disease. So that's how they decide whether, no matter what it is, whether a student is excluded or not. This is a decision that's historically been made by the board and parents, that this is how they're going to handle this.
Follow up?
No, it's just back to question. Thank you. Back to question number one, and that is, at what point is that student not going back to their classroom? Is it when it's first identified, or do they finish the day and then go home with a letter type thing?
Typically, it's when it's identified, but if it was 2 o'clock, you would handle it differently than if it was 10 o'clock. If it was 10 o'clock, typically they're sat in the office and their parents are called, or some other place, maybe down the library, but it is an exclusion.
Thank you. Trustee Benz.
Thank you, Chair Amos. I don't know why this is, well, it is, I hate to see students excluded from school for reasons that are, they're not really strong reasons why they're excluded. And so I'm bumping up against this procedure, but going in a different direction, is there a way perhaps to work on prevention? So the research says, or good practices, best practices say parents should check their child's hair, you know, when they come back from camp, or just before they start school, just before they come back from holidays, at the end of March break, because those are the times when you know, head lice can transfer. Could we promote that checking the week before school starts, at the end of, you know, like send out reminders, perhaps even make a video on how to do it, or acquire a video on how to do it, just to the less kids that have lice, the less they'll be excluded from the system. And we want the kids in school. That's where they achieve, right? So.
Go ahead. Thanks for that suggestion. We can take that back and have a conversation about what that might look like. I think proactive is great. I mean, if we can be proactive in a number of areas, it beats being reactive. So we'll take that back.
Thank you. Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you, through the chair. I have a comment, and so, you know, thinking through this policy, I can't imagine if there's no medical scientific evidence to support an enforcement of a no-knit policy, why we wouldn't test our assumptions here and reconsider it. You know, looking through the Canadian Pediatric Society, the Canadian Association for Infectious Diseases, there was all kinds of merit to remove a no-knit policy. They found them imprudent, intolerant, they promoted hysteria, misinformation. Perhaps our focus needs to be on education. I mean, not too long ago, we would teach kids, you know, if they had to sneeze in their arm, you know, prevent colds. So we don't keep kids home because they have a cold. We tell them if you're going to sneeze or cough, do it in, you know, your armpit. So in the same vein, we could be doing that in our schools. We could be educating our parents as to what they can do to remove those nits, keeping our kids in school.
And again, it's the whole education and proactive side. I agree with you, and I think that's something we definitely could look at. I should say that most schools send out tip sheets, and also on the Board of Health website, there's information on how to reduce it as well. So I think we could do something in that regard.
Thank you, Trustee Harvey-Hope.
Thank you. Appendix C of the administrative procedure does have some instructions on things parents can do, so that's part of what should probably be highlighted. But one of the things that I noticed is in this particular appendix, the private nursing agency staff are the only ones that are supposed to do anything about minimizing embarrassment to the child and relieving anxiety. It's not under the school principal's list. It's not on the teacher's list. It's not under the parent's guardian list. Nowhere else does it say, you know, the private agency people are supposed to work with school staff, but it's not on the list of the school staff to do. And I think that should be the number one thing, the overriding number one. This isn't the end of the world. This is just something you have to take care of and come back. And I think if we, you know, having survived it as a parent a few times, floating around the schools, you know, you occasionally would come to a school and there'd be a sign on the front of the door that said, you know, whatever the particular contagion that was floating around the school was, you just say, okay, fine, whatever, I'll go home and check it. And you just have to take it into account, just like, there's chickenpox floating around or something else. And yes, maybe the procedure policy right now is to stop the contagion by exclusion. Fine. I'm not a scientist, I'll leave it to other people to decide that. But I think the overriding thing is we need to make sure that the children just take it as a matter of course, and it's just something you got to do, and you go back to school, and you got to do whatever we can to take the stigma out of it, so that it's not the unclean and the you don't do whatever, and it's okay if all of your toys have to go in the dryer and all those kinds of things, so that it just becomes second nature, because we don't freak out when kids have chickenpox, and we shouldn't be. It should be something similar. They also, though, are kept home for chickenpox. So anyway, perhaps we could add a couple of lines saying that everybody's in charge of keeping the kid calm.
Thank you. Vice Chair Graves.
Thank you. I too would echo some of the concerns here, and I'd be curious from an equity standpoint, if we were challenged on an exclusion, on what grounds we would be able to support a decision to exclude a child. It was through no fault of the child. It's not on a behavior grounds. It's not on medical grounds. So I do think that there is a greater question there that probably warrants further discussion. My question is a little bit on process and procedure. I see here in the letter home to parents, and also on previous versions of this same letter, that in big bold letters it says, "Do not call the school. They do not have access to the We Care Home Health Services schedule." To me, that's a little bit abrasive. What I would suggest, by way of making it easier for parents, rather than providing them a phone number, could we not ask the We Care Home Health Services provider, who I assume we have some sort of deal or contact with, to simply provide their weekly schedule to the schools that can go home with the parents. So then, rather than the parent having to phone a number, which is probably during off hours and not being able to reach anyone, and then trying to get back to them the next day, perhaps during work hours, trying to schedule appointments and figure out which school they're at, could there not just be attached to this letter a schedule of which schools they're going to be in on which days, and that the parent could then make a decision as to which school they take their child to? I guess just to make it a little bit easier for the parents, particularly those with heavy work schedules, to make it easier for them to comply.
Superintendent Pennyfelder?
Through the chair. We can talk to the provider and see what they can do in that regard. The tender, I would have to check back at the tender that was a joint effort between us and the Catholic School Board, because they have the same policy and they've been working on it with us as well. I would have to check on it what their obligations are for communication, and I know they're kind of like the flying squad, like they get called to the next school, but partly what we wanted to do with some of the things that we put in here is make it easier for parents, and I agree that would make it easier. So if doable, I'll check.
Thank you. And there are no further speakers to this topic, so thank you very much for your information, and I guess we'll be looking forward to seeing the one procedure back. The next item is the board report update. Associate Director Bode, report 16121 on page, I don't know, the blank, so just a minute. I don't know. It's at the back of your board package. Okay, it's 52. I found it.
Thanks, Madam Chair. The report schedule is attached. The highlighted areas are some changes on this particular report. So the special education review slated for October 5th, and we had an update on that. We're in the midst of some fine-tuning around getting that up and running. Special education class placement, that one's coming back on October the 19th, as well as the annual water testing. We've made a change to the primary core French report for December 7th, just to indicate that that report also was to have some analysis or recommendations around primary core French and the number of instructional minutes. So that was a request by trustees that be form part of that report. And then we've added the two additional reports that were mentioned at the last meeting, the Learning Center monitoring report and the Truth and Reconciliation report, one on February, March, and one for June 7th. So those are the updated changes.
Are there any comments and questions? Trustee Harvey Hope.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, a couple. The striking committee appointments report is coming the same day we elect the chair, who is then part of the striking committee. So maybe the wrong date, unless we're planning on working ahead, which would be novel and interesting, but I don't think anybody would actually agree. But anyway, the school year calendar, I understand why it comes in April, but I'm wondering whether or not we could have a cursory discussion of what the calendar actually looks like, or guess what the ministry is going to tell us, because April is almost too late to, if there's a drastic swing one year, again, for life planning and people trying to decide and pulling their children out only when school's closed, it would be helpful for them not to miss it by a whole week. And also the ICT annual strategy report update, which is supposed to be coming once a year, is missing in action from this list of reports. I believe it came maybe last year in January. It really doesn't quite matter when it is, although it might want to come before next year's budget, if there's something in there that says we need to find some money to help them do it. So mid-year is probably good, but at the revised estimates area, but we need to make it on there. It came up as an issue in another forum.
We'll take those suggestions back and have a look.
Thank you. Vice Chair Graves.
Thank you. I appreciate that the Learning Center monitoring was added for March 2017. The motion also does indicate that a plan was to come to the board in October of 2016. I was wondering, it does say a plan and not a report. I don't know if it would be included in this report, but I guess I'm just looking for confirmation that that will come in October.
I know that was discussed at our last agenda review, and it was just a updated report, I believe, as opposed to a report.
I'm going to look over to Superintendent Zonneveld. I think there was something coming earlier, but was it a formal report or was it just an update through?
I'm sorry, I don't have the schedule right on screen in front of me. There's a Learning Center report coming. It's either the next meeting or the meeting after, which will outline our plan in terms of supporting those students that have been referred. And then towards the end, I think we were talking about May. I'm sorry, I don't have it here. March, okay, March as the follow-up time is our intention to report back on what that monitoring and support has looked like.
That's perfect. Thank you.
So we'll get that added on. I think that was that the second meeting in October, Ms. Superintendent Zonneveld? Do you recall?
Yeah, that's fine.
I think so. Yeah.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers to the board report update, thank you very much for your report. So we're now up to committee reports. Do we have any committee reports tonight? Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you. Thrilled to see so many Halton District School Board trustees and staff attending the official opening of the Center for Skills Development and Training. As you may know, it was their new facility in Burlington at 3350 Service Road. Thank you to Associate Director Bogue, Trustees Daniele, Collard, Grabentz, and Harvey Hope for attending. I know they were very pleased to see such a good turnout.
Thank you. Trustee Collard.
Thank you. As I mentioned in a previous section, the SEAC has started up for the year, and we had our first meeting last week, as well as the reporting schedule. There was discussion of the placement and replacement of, or location and relocation of placements. Getting my words all mixed up there. Administrative report, and I know that that one will have further discussion at the next SEAC meeting. And it was a really good refresher that we had on the function of SEAC, the role of SEAC, and it was a very productive meeting.
Thank you. Trustee Gray.
Thank you very much. The Audit Committee met for the first time last night, and through the Audit Committee, there is a new process in place where it's now moved into public and private sessions. And through the public session last night, a recommendation was made that would need to be acknowledged, I guess, here, and it's a process piece. We're not really sure how to move this forward. However, it is time sensitive, and the recommendation coming from the public part of the audit meeting last night has to do with the establishing a selection committee in accordance with Ontario Regulation 361 to fill the position of a non-board member. And so that has come from that committee, and it's needing to be processed, but we're not sure about the process piece, where this should come for receipt or for confirmation.
I believe in the past it's come for receipt, not confirmation. You believe it's the other? It's not HLF, it's the Audit Committee. Superintendent Veerman, do you recall which the process has been in the past?
Through the chair, I believe the last time in 2013, it was in private session at that time, it did come as a recommendation to have a selection committee in place. Okay. However, now that we have open sessions, public sessions, the question becomes whether it's an action item or as part of the committee reports, similar to other committee reports.
Well, an action item can come from committee reports. So you can make a motion from the committee to be placed, and then you can get the... Go ahead.
Just reading the Education Act, the Regulation 36110 that outlines audit committees. It says under selection committee, each board shall have a selection committee for the purposes of identifying persons who are not board members, and so on. So, and it outlines that it should be the director, the senior business official, and the chair of the board, or designate. So it seems like each board shall have. It means that we should just have it.
So that means that it is a designated committee, but it's whether I designate, right? Trustee Harvey Hope.
Having been around for the last two selection committees, this request is merely to request the chair to appoint the member herself or another member to the selection committee. That is the only piece. It's not a question of asking for permission to set up the selection committee. It's not a permission to do anything else. It's just, please, Madam Chair, give us the third member of the committee. And at that point, the situation continues. And we can find the document that we did it the last time. I would have all of that information.
I believe it would be captured in our minutes as well, probably. Audit committee minutes, right? Okay, so then there's a request to me. So I've received the request, and so I'm asking those members of the audit committee who may want to be on that committee, if I want to designate, to let me know. Trustee Oliver.
Thank you, Chair. On September 15th, I attended this school year's first meeting of the Joint Health and Safety Committee, and the subsequent meeting is booked for November 17th.
Thank you. Trustee Gerbetz.
Just to mention that the PIC planning team met last Thursday, and we are working very hard on getting the October 15th PIC conference, which is a free conference for all parents in Halton. There are over 24 sessions. We have 2 excellent keynote speakers, and registration, just go online for to register. We do have free child minding. There is also a free late breakfast and lunch available, and we can take care of any special nutritional needs as well, including halal. So please, any parents out there, please sign up. It's going to be an excellent conference.
Do you want to mention who the keynotes are? Craig Kilberger and Dr. Bruce Ferguson. It will be a very exciting day. And so when you register, that's where you put your dietary requests or other requests. All right. Trustee Elharrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Just a reminder to colleagues, I guess this is about a meeting upcoming related to Inspire and the next steps. That meeting date has been set for next Wednesday, September 28th at 4:30 p.m., so preceding our Committee of the Whole meeting. And for anybody who has ideas that isn't able to come, I think we'll send out an email just inviting those comments so we can be as inclusive as possible. And number 2, the environmental management team met last evening, and I think I've reported in the past regarding the Green Meetings Charter and Admin procedure, and those finishing touches are taking place, and I understand that there's going to be a request that they be reviewed at Admin Council in October. I'm not sure if that can be accommodated, but basically the request is for as soon as possible. We also discussed a number of ways of connecting with schools such as school ground greening, walk and bike to school, putting emphasis on those types of things, along with waste reduction, 3 R's, and wise energy use. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Patton.
Thank you. The Accessibility Coordinating Committee was not able to meet on September 15th. So our next scheduled meeting is on November the 10th, unless we make up a meeting in October. And we are looking for a SEAC member. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Graves.
I think the Committee of the Whole met last week to discuss some overarching goals. We got down to the level of some items that we would like to see come up, and in an upcoming meeting we will need to prioritize those items. And just a note to the chairs of the committees, the standing committees, that we should meet at some point in the next 2 days. So if you could please send me your availability, for transparency's sake, we should really have the agenda out by Friday. So we'll see if we can pull it together, even if perhaps we have to meet online to do so that we can have an agenda out to the public on Friday for next Wednesday's meeting. You're starting up quick.
Thank you. Trustee Elharrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, my question is for Vice Chair Graves, and just in advance of that meeting of the committee chairs, it would be helpful to be able to have a look at that list that was generated, maybe?
Yes, I have a Google Doc in process, and my plan is tonight after the meeting to finish entering the last items from our meeting from last time, so that hopefully will be updated either tonight or early tomorrow morning, distributed.
Thank you. Okay, no more committee reports at the moment, so we will move on to the director's report. Associate Director Bogue.
I have nothing to report.
That was short and sweet. All right. Communications from the chair. I just wanted to mention that today is International Day of Peace, and that signifies that each year the International Day of Peace is observed around the world. It's devoted to strengthening the ideals of peace, both within and among all nations and peoples. And today, the UN Secretary General said, "Let us all work together to help all human beings achieve dignity and equality, to build a greener planet and to make sure no one is left behind." And I find that really fits in with what we're trying to do as a school board. So I think that we all already own those principles, and I think that we as a board are probably trying to have each day as an International Day of Peace, but I just wanted to recognize it. And that's the only comment I had tonight. So, trustee questions and comments. Trustee Gravens.
Thank you. I have just two things. The first is that Halton Food for Thought and Healthy Kids Community Challenge Burlington have a great event that schools can register for called Great Big Crunch. It's on October the 13th, but schools need to register by the end of this month. And you can find out more information on the haltonfoodforthought.com website. Basically, they would like it's about eating apples, simultaneous crunch happening throughout the school. And it's to, of course, promote healthy eating as well as promote local eating. The other thing I wanted to do is actually ask Superintendent Cullen about, I've had many families that are looking for estimated times of completion for air conditioning installation projects in their schools, and I was just wondering, do we have that information available?
Through the chair, that will be part of the report that's scheduled on the list of board reports. So we will be bringing back a school-by-school schedule with the electrical updates, the electrical upgrades, the air conditioning upgrades, and all the various projects related to Close the Gap. We also hope to bring back at some point shortly after that, or maybe even part of that, the balance of the projects that we're going to be recommending related to the other funds that we mentioned earlier that the province has recently released.
Thank you. Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you. I have two public service announcements. The first one's called Join the J. On October 2nd, Joe Brandt is attempting to break a Guinness Book of World Records by having the most people in Spencer Smith Park in Burlington forming a giant letter J. This is a free event and is a unique opportunity for all our Halton students to participate in really what is the largest awareness campaign for our local healthcare provider. Students and school communities are encouraged to just show up. While they're asking people to register their intent to show, you can just show up. They will register on site. If you have high school students and they register, they'll put them to work and they'll give them 2 hours of community service. Incidentally, for those who are not available to attend that day, the Burlington Post is asking community to come down to Spencer Smith Park tomorrow, and you can get in the paper because they're doing a promo at 12:30. The other event is for those foodies on October 2nd, same day. There is an event. It's called EAT, Explore Authentic Tastes. Funds from this event go to Food for Kids. This provides, I want to say, food baskets that go home with students in Halton, children who are struggling through the weekend making ends meet. Tickets are $75 and you can buy them online. Apparently, Halton alone has 350 students who receive healthy food packages every weekend in 50 of our schools. So I hope you'll join me at one of those events coming up in the next couple weeks.
Thank you very much. Trustee Gray.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder to all staff that the Halton Learning Foundation Benefit Bash is being held at the Burlington Convention Center on the 10th of November. And I think information may have gone out to everyone, but if you haven't had a chance to sign up for that or go aboard and reserve your ticket, please do so. And one last report from Halton Hills. I think I reported last spring that a bike challenge was underway where $85,000 would be given to the local Georgetown Hospital if 400,000 kilometers, in other words, the distance to the moon and back, were ridden by the residents, particularly students in Halton Hills. I'd like to report tonight that they're 92% of the way there. 370,000 kilometers have been ridden since the kickoff, which happened at Ethel Gardner Public School. And with 18 days left, there's only 30,000 kilometers to go. So hopeful of great weather in the next 18 days so that $85,000 can be given to our Georgetown Hospital Foundation. So kudos to all of the folks up in the hills, and keep riding those bikes.
All good news. Okay, and seeing no further speakers, can I have a motion to adjourn? Trustee Reynolds, seconded by Trustee Daniele. All those in favor? Just a minute. Gotta find it. Okay, I found it. Dun, 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 dun. I guess the two student trustees didn't sign it, so. And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much, and have a great night, everyone. So can I ask a question? Where do you find the form for phones now so you can add a U.S. plan when you go out of the country? Because I cannot find it.